kind?
It's the same thing, yeah. The exact same. He met those same guys at the convention later that day.
Well, tell them, they should tell us thank you.
They should.
They don't know it.
Be partners. We have to get some kind of cut on that.
And
some type of a matchmaker fee.
Little nod.
Are we recording on both?
Both ends.
Awesome.
All right. Welcome to Fireside Tats, the premier tattoo education podcast for tattoo artists and collectors.
Education. Was that too? Was that too much?
That was perfect. Glad to have everybody back.
Yeah, thanks.
We've podcasted since Austin. We podcasted with Paul last week.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that was a good one. I say that. I think I drank too much on that one, but
no,
I'm gonna watch it.
That was good.
I feel like we were smart.
Yeah, Paul was absolutely on top of it too. He's got great.
Found out that Paul did a leg piece for my buddy.
Awesome.
Look at that.
Just great work.
Leg piece.
Oh yeah, another piece. Yeah, Nintendo leg piece. I think I know which one it is. Is it older?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
It needs color.
Yeah. So, on this episode of Fireside Tats, we're going to answer a viewer question, and I feel like this question can take us a little while because we talked about it a little bit before we got in front of these microphones. But I think since we're not exactly sure what the issue is, we're going to address it in a couple of different ways.
I think that's a good, just take them one at a time, and then, because I think, first, what's the question?
Okay, so the question, I'm going to read it just as it was written, and then I'll explain why we're going to address it two ways.
Yeah.
So it says, my color work always needs a second pass. It doesn't seem to matter how fast or slow I move. It doesn't heal bright or vivid. I'm wondering if it could be my pigments. What type of pigments are you guys using? We're both pretty confident that it's probably not the pigments.
Well,
Most likely. Most manufacturers today are making pretty... If you're using the big names,
it's true. A lot of them use the same people for the same pigment. There are not a lot of pigment manufacturers. They're using a lot of the same pigment. They're just mixing them in really unusual ways. Yeah. And they're packaging them with certain color names and some to get you into a certain set of colors. Yeah. We definitely use different brands. Eternal, though, quite a bit. Fusion, we've been using quite a bit lately. Tins. Yeah. And you still like some Starbright every once in a while.
There are a couple of Starbright colors that I really like. I like their yellow ochre a lot, and I like their canary yellow. Most of their yellows.
So if you're trying to push like a brand, those are a couple brands right there.
And if you're using any of those reputable brands, I doubt your problem is coming from your pigments. It's more than likely. Well, first off,
go ahead.
Okay, sorry, not trying to take over, but first off. The way that it's worded, at first it says my color work always needs a second pass. Yeah. So my immediate reaction was, okay, it's spotty, it's not solid.
Right, that's the first thing I would think too.
Then it says it doesn't heal bright or vivid.
Totally two different things.
Completely different. Yeah. So I don't know if we're talking about spotty tattoo work, in which case it could be user error, machine, power supply, needle configurations, any number of things that we'll talk about.
Yeah, we'll go through them, I think, one at a time. And hopefully, if you go down your own little mental checklist, it's probably going to be one of these, hopefully.
Probably.
And hopefully will help take care of the problem, hopefully.
Yeah. So let's start there. Let's assume that it's spotty color and not just that they don't feel like it's as bright as it could be or vivid as it could be, because that's a different problem. So,
spotting. Yeah.
Spotty.
Usually, I would think you're probably going too fast. A lot of people, you get larger spans of skin. You think you should get a little quicker in your stroke, and you start actually ruining your stroke. It's not something where, unless you're just comfortable working up in needle size, that you're going to solve a problem by doing a lot of work and doing it quickly. You should still have the same stroke structure. You should really be paying attention to that. And then hopefully you're getting an even pass and an even coverage. But you should be able to see that too, I think, on that first pass. Now, there are some things, if you're going a little too fast and you're using certain color things, maybe you're not really paying attention to what's bleeding. I have a thing where if it's not bleeding, I probably didn't touch it with any ink. That's not probably a go-to every time. You don't want to beat the skin up either. And so be really aware if you're starting to really add a little longer stroke to it, or adding a little too much stroke, or if you're starting to up needle size, larger circles. Is what I'm saying. If you're trying to make too many in a shorter pass, like I said, you've probably I'm guessing it's probably working up in size, and that all of a sudden you're doing bigger work, and you're trying to make bigger. Yeah,
and you can do that without even realizing. I agree. My first suggestion would be he says it doesn't matter how fast or slow I move, but consistency is the key, and slower is probably better than faster, and smaller, tighter, even circles. Right. It's really an act of patience to put in solid color.
It is, and definitely be really aware of what needle groupings you're using to put it in. That's probably another whole problem, but it could be the problem. It could be the problem. Definitely, I think using smaller needle groups, sometimes you can chew the skin up, or you can cause a little more irritation. If you're wanting to do larger pieces of work, you can work up to a larger needle size, but be aware what your machine is probably doing at that point too.
Everything's going to change when you start pushing larger configurations.
And depending on the machine you're using, we talked about coils, we've talked about rotaries before, but you're going to need a machine that's really set and tuned for doing large impact color work. If you're going to do that, you really want to make sure that you've got somebody helping you tune it or tuning it up. I mean, we definitely could give you some pointers on that too, but that's a whole separate problem if you think your machine's not running right, or you're.
And if you're, I'm a proponent of using the biggest needle configuration that I can get away with, even if it means that I can't get into every spot and I have to come back with a smaller one, pack up against lines and stuff, and get into tighter areas that larger configuration couldn't make it into. I like to do that anyways, just because I like to see my color pushed up with some kind of a round configuration up against lines really well. So
as long as you're consistent with it, you should get a good packing the ink in. You should really see it. And hopefully then you won't get what I think is probably I'm guessing some textural spotting is probably you're missing spots, and it may look like it's there, but there are some colors that are tricky and that will absolutely defy your eye if you just don't get it in solid.
And coming back to it after it's set for a little while, moving away from that large area color, especially not just especially any area of solid fill, getting away from it and letting some of the irritation falling out, and looking at it before you wrap up for the day. If it's too beat up to go back into that day, I don't think it's a bad idea to go back. You said you seem to always have to go back and need a second pass. In my opinion, all tattoos can use a second pass. I can always pack in a little more color, make it a little richer. So I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing that you're going back in a second time. Right. If it's because it's spotty and inconsistent, then I understand your concern. But I would also mention stretching. If you feel like everything is consistent, but you're moving around the arm, or you're getting into areas where maybe it's easy to keep one area taut, and then you pull into an area that's a little bouncy.
Plenty of areas that will do that to you, and you just be moving into a different grain. You just don't realize it. There are places that take ink much better than others, and if you're really putting it in an odd angle, you can absolutely get like you said, if you're not stretching it very well, you can get a lot of bounce, and being not really aware of that grain of where it is, putting it in at an odd angle, you may be getting, like you said, not putting it as deep as it nearly needs to be. It could just be glancing it off at an angle, and maybe just giving a little resistance, depending on how much you're pushing and pulling on the skin, if it's really got any kind of resistance to it or not.
So approaching it from different angles, and that's another thing is when you're making a transition from, say, the outer arm to the bicep or inner arm, be conscious of what it looks like as you're making that transition. Don't pack the entire bicep. Hit a half-inch by half-inch area, wipe it, look back for a second, and see, well, is that going in now that I've made this corner? Do I need to come from a different angle? Do I need to stretch from the inside of the arm instead of the outside? Try to catch that stuff early on. If you're looking at at those marks as you make them and wiping regularly and rinsing your tube regularly, where you get away from it and you're not just working.
And that may be part of the problem too, like trying to do an all-over technique when you first start, instead of really encapsulating little areas as you go along, like doing little pieces that take the ink and doing all the color in those areas, instead of doing all your dark blue, all your next blue, all your green, all your and basically losing it that way, trying to do too much in too large of areas instead of really being conscious of the areas that you really need to fill and then move on. I think that may be part of it too, is trying to do too much at one time. If you can definitely reduce it down and saying doing pieces of it so you're really aware of what the colors look like and doing a full finished area and then moving to the next section. You may not have nearly as much problem trying to, like I said, it may be just trying to rush yourself. You know,
sometimes you just do that unconsciously. You know, you don't, or subconsciously you just find yourself seeing the end of a fill and kind of speeding up towards it, and it's really it is just an exercise in patience. It's the same way with we're talking about solid fills, but blends as well. If if you really take your time with blends and don't just go from your red to your yellow, but work that, mix your colors in the tube and work that color from red to yellow and try to stay consistent and slow, you'll find that that you'll probably have better results in your blends.
Better fill, and being actually really aware of what the colors you're kind of transitioning to. I mean, having them mixed beforehand and keeping enough of them so that you're not continually doing that. That may not be the issue in this case, but I think it's a helpful reminder. It's like if you're doing large blends, like to keep enough that you really are keeping consistent color, and so you're not changing different tonal colors, and maybe that's where you're having a problem, where just the actual your blends and your values are trying to change, say drastically.
Yeah. What about, you brought up whenever someone here had the problem a few episodes ago with their lines not going in. We had talked about not rinsing your tube enough. That's another.
I mean, you definitely can get what it calls basically like contamination into your ink, and that could be from using a metal-on-metal surface. It could be just not from cleaning your tube out completely. If you've done, like, say, your gray wash beforehand, it could be easily that your colors are getting so thick that you're getting a slower movement in your tube, and you're not realizing that maybe just turning it, maybe this is just in one case, turning it up a little when you're using some of your very light blends, or turning it back down if you're going way too fast, and maybe you're just probably chewing the skin up a little bit or chopping it up. Hopefully you're not having problems with that where you're like not gross scabbing or anything like that, or you're not having really major things. But I think a lot of it is consistency. It's like once you get used to being able to, say, push a large field of color, you're going to find that really comfortable, and hopefully, like I said, don't alter from that. Don't just start all of a sudden, I can get faster now because I'm consistent. Absolutely keep the consistency, and however long it takes. It's not a race. And hopefully you're not there's no there's no crazy finish line. I mean, we've talked before about you can endlessly work into a piece. Hopefully you don't feel like that you having a second, a jab at one and blending them a little bit more is an inopportune thing. You should be able to do that. Hopefully your customers are into that. Now, if it's just those things, a matter of like it's obviously things are just falling out.
Yeah, and you're having to do constant free touch-ups and things like
that. That's probably a different. Like you said, that could again. We're talking about technical things. It could be a problem with you maybe using your needles a little too long, where all of a sudden your needles are getting a little dull if you're using them more than a couple hours. It's like if you're working on a 5-6 hour piece, absolutely switch those needles out sometimes. You may not know it, but you may getting small burrs or putting it in an odd angle and wearing thin on the side. There's a ton of things that can happen to your needle while you're using it, and if you're not really keeping up with it, don't try to use that same needle for 5, 6, 7 hours, and unless you just have to. I mean, there shouldn't be a
and when talking about mixing or rinsing your inks more often than less, it's really, you may not notice inks diluting as much during doing line work, because a lot of people don't really run off of the tube doing line with their lines. Most people kind of work off the needle, and whenever you're packing solid color, a lot of people really depend on that mag like that mag tube sitting on the skin, and so it's really picking up just a lot more shit than you would if you with your tube, a 16th or an 1/8 inch off the skin.
Yeah, and even now we've talked before about this is especially during the winter. You get a lot of extra excess skin exfoliating into the tube. There's a lot of stuff that you'll notice. You'll look down and you're getting a little blood. You're getting a little like I said, extra effluvium from time to time. It's like you may be getting washed out or grayed out colors, and that's another thing that we were talking about. Really reputable companies, but we didn't talk about some that they may be using other things that are like I said, they may have glycerin or other products in it that are a little more filler, and you just may be having a problem using something that's not just concentrated inks too. Like
maybe so.
I doubt that, but
it's possible.
I'm
while
just
we're
thinking,
talking about those needles,
what other things could you talk about?
While we're talking about needles, if you're trying to fill big spaces, we were talking about needle groupings, but we didn't talk a lot about configurations. If you're trying to fill big spaces with a big round, or even those, I've seen people use those stacked mags that are like 2 layers of needles stacked directly on top of each other. That kind of stuff, you really, in order for that slow, smooth motion to really work well, that kind of spread mag, whatever, where you line everything up and you just spread the needles apart, they aren't as traumatic to the skin. They allow for a lot of consistency because they're kind of spread out, and they allow for that motion where when you take a configuration that just has that's really dense, I think that it's really easy to beat up skin with something like that.
Yeah, especially if you're using like flat mags that are they're really not used for color work a lot, or if you're trying to use larger round needles, why I don't know why you would, but unless you're like for a color lining or doing some other thing like that.
I see them selling round shaders all the time.
Don't use there's no sense in it. Like I said, there are smaller versions of mags where you can get down to 5 mags or 7 mags and stuff, which are great. You've used rounded ones that are more like Japanese, the curve.
I use the curve style a lot.
That for I think larger, especially pieces, work great because you can get a lot more feathering, especially if you want to get some kind of painterly effects. But again, it comes down to like being really comfortable with your stroke structure. If you get comfortable with that, hopefully you're not going to beat the skin up. Be conscious of like you said, we've talked before about when you first getting these needles, they are super sharp. If you go in and just start using it like you would, a needle you would for the first 15 to 20 minutes, it's not going to react the same way. You're going to have to give it a little. You got to be a little patient with it, like the liners, where they're so tight that sometimes it just won't put in the greatest line until it's probably been 10 or 15 minutes. Where started off in a very, I say, an easier place than some of your biggest, fattest color or your biggest, darkest shading, because you could easily beat that skin up and cut it without realizing it, especially with a brand new sharp needle right out of the box.
Talking, just jumped in my head. We were talking about stretching and moving to different parts of the body. And we were also talking about the
stretch it.
We were also talking about the moving in a consistent slow yourself down. The amount of power that you're providing, it's really not a one-size-fits-all. I see a lot of questions on forums about what do you run your liners at and what do you run your shaders at. Well, different parts of the body just require different. It should be a constant adjustment. You don't always run everything at the same speed all the time. Some inner arm skin that's really sensitive. You'll probably want to slow that down a little bit from something that's a lot tougher. Some trucker that has. That has leathery forearms or something like that.
And that's the thing. It isn't one. Yeah, it's not a 1-to-1 at all.
Yeah. So think about that too. If you find yourself moving to the inside of the arm and you see that it's really getting beat up quickly and it was working fine on the outside of the arm, back off a little bit, slow down a little bit more. You really want to run that thing. Well, most people do. I guess it's whatever you get used to, I guess. But I think that if you're having trouble, my suggestion would be
preach it.
To slow it down as far as you possibly can until you find that it's too slow. If you're dragging or catching or just you're not penetrating or whatever, you're probably doing too slow. But it's better to move too slow than too fast if you're having problems.
That's a great place to start at. Don't start high. Start on the low end. Right. Know where it's starting to really say bottom out when it's just not getting any, and then get it just in tune past that. And like you said, depending on the color, sometimes you might have to adjust that, and depending on the place on the body, you might have to adjust that. But that's a great place to start. Where we've talked before, where it's just barely in contact, where it's barely getting everything that it needs to really run well. And then if you've got to turn it up a little bit, well, turn it up just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's
slowly.
slowly but surely. Okay. And if you can get used to that, I think, like you said, in case you really get into like some lighter colors where you're having to mix a lot of white back in, or you're having to really mix some thicker inks, or especially when they start to dry, because some of them dry very quickly.
Yeah.
But rarely would you have to adjust it past that. Hopefully that would take care of a lot of the spotting that you might have just from mechanical means.
Yeah. I mean, I think that covers it. If someone has any other ideas that could be causing it, if it's a
watch your stretching, watch your needle, watch your speed. Yep. Watch your stroke.
Watch your power.
Watch your power.
Be consistent in your motion. Pay attention to that needle configuration. Go on and use just a regular mag. Try not. I like the curved. You use the flat.
I do.
Actually, I use both of them. I use a lot of different configurations, but I do not fill large areas of color with anything round. I don't.
There's
see
no
any
sense
reason
in
for
it.
Yeah,
Right.
So, if you do,
don't do it.
If you do that and it works great for you, send us an email and let us know why.
How come you haven't keloided skin like every other
right.
jackass out there?
So let's take a quick break and then get to what the other problem might have been, which is going to have more to do with less to do with the technical side and more to do with maybe the
color
composition,
and
artistic.
How are you
side.
Mixing those colors?
Let's get artsy this time.
Yeah. Are we going to start that now?
No, after our break.
After the break?
I'm just setting
I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, before we get, I'd like to thank St. Louis, just for a second, Four Hands. A friend of Bob Westerholt, who actually says he's listened to quite a few of these and watched them. So he meant to tell you that the other day too. But brought us some beers down from St. Louis and just wanted to say thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thanks,
on the
man.
air.
That was awesome. It's good to see you.
Yeah, he brought us some the chestnut too, urban chestnut, which is like a shout out for them. Schleifen.
Yeah, that was good. And we'd like to thank our friends at Beard Balm too that hooked us up with free Beard Balm
I
in
was about
Austin.
to say I brought this today, but just in case you didn't see it, there's pictures of us on. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
love it.
It is nice.
You guys have really helped us out.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Our beards are luscious.
They are, man.
We'll see you guys in a few minutes.
Thanks. How are our levels?
Yeah. Do we need to level up?
Do we need to go ahead and...
Should we level?
I think you just leveled up.
Should we level down? I think I am leveled up.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to part 2.
Hey.
So we're going to get back on the same question, but approach it from a different angle.
A little different. Yeah.
So we're going to assume that he's not going back through because it's spotty, but because he doesn't feel like it's as bright or as vivid as it could be.
Vivid. That's the key word right there.
Yeah, and I think you could probably, if you were just not really analyzing it like we are, you could probably use either. You could say like, it's not just when it's healed, it's just not that bright, and you might mean the same. They could mean the same thing, I guess. They just don't stand out. So
a couple reasons why.
A couple of reasons. The biggest reason, in my opinion, is or what makes a tattoo a success or a failure. And I didn't come up with this. I've heard plenty of people. I've heard plenty of people say it. It's contrast.
Yeah.
Colors, high key bright colors next to high key bright colors don't look that bright. Right. But bright colors next to a contrasting color, like a muted or a light versus a dark, a muted tone versus a really bright tone.
Right.
You can push colors and make them appear a lot brighter than they actually are. Guy Atchison's a perfect example of that. He was one of the first ones I ever saw do it, where he had a light source within one of his organic things that just had this crazy glow. And you're like, wow, how do you get that crazy glow? Well, because it was white and yellow and barely orange to red to like purple to dark. Right. And it was a stark contrast, and it looked like a really central light source. It's not that he packed that white in there better than someone else. He just knew how to use that white.
Right. And I think, like you said before, it's like using sometimes really high energy, high key, bombastic colors against ones that maybe even in the same range, but are maybe mixed with them to make like these tertiary colors, these ones in between that are chromatic colors. Like how to if you're not pushing like I like to do it with like a little bit of more of a gray wash under value, like kind of a grisaille kind of building it up Hopefully, you do it in some other different ways too.
I do it
by
in different
mixing
ways.
some of the straight color into the values and stuff.
Yeah,
and you can do it both ways. That's but a good way of doing it, like you said, is basically pushing some of your high key colors against ones that are a little more muted, and then making sure that you're that a lot of your colors just aren't getting diffused against, like, say, if you're putting all your highlights up against what would be the border of a very light colored skin palette too.
Yeah.
If you're not working with any background tones, if you're not leaving any little, say, tonal masses to help kind of push it off the skin
contrast,
tone,
essentially.
yeah, you're going to lose it, especially if you're always putting your highlights in a certain place, especially on the edges of maybe your material. And a lot of people have that with, like, this kind of all over lights that we've done, what we've talked about before. It's like really pick a place. You can work with drop shadows that way. You can pick with at least creating a lot of volume that way. And there are a ton of ways to do that, but I like to do it with a little gray, like I said, gray wash. And building that up first, and then
it knocks the color back, mutes a color, so that with the areas that you did not use the gray wash, you can push straight, brighter colors and give the appearance of it being a lot brighter than it actually is.
Your line work, which is true blacks, against gray washes, and then leaving high tone empty places that you can just push color value against your gray tonal areas. In the same fashion.
I just recently watched Jeff Gogwe has a DVD, and he talks a lot about he has a whole section on contrast, and he you should watch it if whoever asked this question. It's called Tattoo as I See It, and if that's the kind of issue that you're having, if it's not a technical issue, if you just don't think your colors are bright enough, he talks about contrast from light dark to color contrast between complementaries and knocking colors back, to line contrast, to textural contrast, to contrast in subject matter, like trying to push. If he I think he used the example, if he's going to do like a really dark, sinister skull, he wants to try to balance that with something, whether it's lilies or something soft and life-giving, or something if he's trying to represent death. And he likes to push contrast in every element of his tattoos. And now this is completely off topic, but talking about contrast, he made the comment, and I guess I knew it and never put it into words. You know, when you're using a complementary color scheme, your blue is it complements your orange, but when you mix those two, they cancel each other out. They kind of gray down.
Right. Yeah, it's like a tertiary color that
which
becomes
is
a chromatic.
Exactly.
Value.
They kind of mute themselves. And which is completely different than taking one of those colors and mixing it back with black to knock it down.
That's probably one of the best ways of taking, like, some of the actual, like I said, high key out of it is by mixing it with its complement, but in a very small amount. Don't do it in large amounts at first, because you could make it very muddy. You don't want a muddy color, but
you don't want it to get too muddy. But if it's too high key and you're trying to knock it back just a little, I think Jeff used the example of, if you have a yellow and you want to darken it, if you mix it with black, it's going to turn green. But if you mix it with a little bit of purple, it's going to mute out. It's going to fall away with just the tiniest bit, and it's going to allow you to push something else up in front of it. And I guess I knew that because I mixed so much in the tube, but I never really thought of it. I don't guess. I just never. I never thought of it that way, but it really does do that. If you kind of mix it back with its complementary, you'll gray out. And I guess what I never really thought of is that being that much different than mixing it with a little black, a little white, and trying to physically gray it out. But it does it is different.
It is, and it gives you a different tonal range. Like I said, even if you're working just within that same family, like you said, working not so much like you just with black, but a deeper color that's in that same purple, straight, very close to it. And it probably never hurts to, especially if you're wondering what you're capable with your inks, is mixing them back and forth a little bit, so that you're really creating some unusual color palettes and stuff, and working out of those. A limited color palette, but with a very diffuse ones, like I said, within the same family, that are complementary. So you know that they're going to push off each other, and you're gonna have a good tattoo. But hopefully you can kind of maybe push your palette just a little bit more, if that's the problem too. If you're not having a high contrast, and maybe remember, like, sometimes pushing your darks and lights, which is, it may be part of the color problem. It may not be, but I bet we've always talked. It's really, a lot of people are afraid to put a lot of darks in and working out of them, and it's key to a lot of tattoos, especially if your line work is, there's no play off of that. If you're not getting a lot of dimension out of your line, or you're doing textural effects, it may just be pushing contrast on the other on the outside or the inside of your piece.
Yeah. You can get caught up in those things, like the textural effects or the high key colors or one thing, and you get so caught up in the idea of making sure that you get that in there solid, or that texture looks believable or whatever, but let that tattoo heal and look at it and say, what's my darkest area? Where is it? Is it well represented? Is it dark? Do I have a lot of? Am I pushing the spectrum of light and dark in this tattoo? If I decided a layout using contrast, or did I just pack all these tricks and all these bright colors through this tattoo? It's easy to do. I say that because I've got the same. It's a battle I fight too. So.
Yeah, I tend to build up. I know a lot of people go out absolutely the opposite way. They put all their darkest darks in first and work out from there. And I guess I'm even on that. I'm a little afraid to go dark sometimes, but it's really worth it. Like, trying to explore both ends of it to create a good, like we said, contrast, a good positive and negative approach. And you're going to find a lot of tattoos lend itself toward that, especially if you get into Japanese or any kind of inspired tattoo like that. Even traditional work, it's a definitely lights and darks against the negative space that you're leaving, even if it's skin tone.
Yeah, I think there's some of the best examples of it. The reason the Japanese stuff is so successful and appears so bright and holds up so well is it's all contrast. Right. I mean, there are solid fields of color, but if there weren't solid fields of heavy black surrounding it, it wouldn't stand up like it does, and it wouldn't stand out like it does.
And I think there is some theory for them, not them, but in a lot of the art prints and a lot of the things, it's just like that 1/3 negative while the 2/3 positive, or that kind of, or I guess it's in reverse, 1/3 like actual imagery, and then what would be 2/3 of it breaking away. So you do see a lot of the contrast in heavy areas, but it's usually just about 1/3 of like of the scape or the space being used. It's a very, I say it's a traditional kind of spin to it, but it's an easy way to look at it. If you're just looking, how much should it be? About 1/3. It should be dark. You should be pushing. Even if it's your like it's shaded areas or your high key concentrated darks, you should at least pull at least that much out of it, probably. Try that, just see if that helps at all.
I didn't know that it was 1/3, but that makes sense. I lost my train of thought for a second. I was I was thinking about the healed tattoos again. Looking back into when you're going back into these tattoos, if you're filling these, if you're having to go back into these fields of color every few weeks, like you say, maybe look at your darkest area in that tattoo and go ahead and pack a little straight black into it. I mean, obviously it's tattoo to tattoo, but if you have a field of something that was supposed to be dark, go ahead and hit it a second time when it's healed. You're there anyways. You're hitting these colors, trying to smooth them out. See if that doesn't help. If you really try to decide where you want the focus of the piece to be, push the contrast in that area. Use contrast in your favor as far as lost edges, dark areas. If you've got, if you have a light source here, it probably shouldn't be, the highlights up here probably shouldn't be as bright as the highlights that are right here. So think about it as a whole. Push your darks darker and decide what's most important, what you want people to see, and punch that out as lighter. And you'll see that I think that everything appears maybe a little brighter than it really is.
Yeah, and look for places that you can really use, like, say, some secondary tones that are, especially if you're doing things on the volume, there's usually a color that it's pulling off that you want to add into it. It may not be just a complementary, it may be in a different family, but a secondary one that another tone that can help really push some of the field and try to find a place to put it in. Like, don't limit your palette sometimes. If you think you know what's best, like, go ahead and put a couple of ones out. Like we were talking before, especially with say orange and blue, like but a light pink or a light magenta off of a blue and or a magenta off of an orange. They work so well together. And if you can find a place to put it in, it may be another, like I said, maybe finding places to put some other colors in that'll help your palette.
It'll help push that.
And it'll help push that a little bit.
Colors of the surrounding pieces, I think, are the most obvious to make the whole piece believable, to look like it exists in the same space. You know, if you've got a blue skull and a pink background, you know, kind of catching a soft pink edge on the bottom of your skull will kind of it'll help to push the blues of your skull out a little stronger, and it'll also make that skull look more part of that space than just having a blue skull on a pink background. It'll look like a sticker, you know.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if that really helps, but that's some things
that that's off topic, but.
No, that's what I was saying. No, I think that if hopefully some of that will help your palette. If that's the problem, if it's not just the actual technical ability or the physical ability, hopefully you can push your palette a little bit and see if there's something you're missing along the way. And in the end, if it's you're using old colors and somebody's mixing them down too much, or you're missing concentration.
If you're still using dry pigments and someone in your shop's mixing them down,
that's what I'm saying. Could be problem. Like, I don't know what else it could be. It's
maybe we should have just
a new palette,
a
new colored.
Maybe we dismissed the idea of the inks, the pigments too soon. But if you're using one of the reputable manufacturers, which it's so competitive now, nobody's really putting out real shitty inks that I know of. I don't know. I don't try. I try new inks fairly regularly. I'm not shy to like grab. If I see a color I'd like, I'll grab it from whoever. And I rarely get inks now that I'm just like, I can't get this ink in the skin. So they're all pretty packed with.
The only probably other thing I'd recommend is what I can't remember who told me. It's like, if you don't put the color out, you won't use it. And so go ahead and throw some colors out that you may not even need in there, and try to find a place for them. I say you work with a limited color palette, but try to really work that in or fuse some colors in that you wouldn't normally push, and you might find your palette changing a little bit where you're getting a better feel for it and really exploring some things. But other than that, if it's a specific technical, hopefully we've hit something.
I would think so. Hopefully these things help. Send us a follow up. Try, we probably threw too much out, but pick a couple of things that we said and try them. What makes the most sense? I mean, think about your process and think about something. Surely there's something that we mentioned that you could probably do better, because there's stuff that we mentioned that I know I could do better. So so give it a shot, man, and see if you can get that color in there a little more solid. Maybe a big needle configuration, larger needle configuration. Slow it down a little bit if it is a technical issue. So hope that helped. Yeah,
don't pull anything back into your inks. Don't water them down. Don't try to go ahead and clean them out.
Clean out your tubes regularly. All the time.
All the time.
Focus on another part of the room while you're doing that. Save your eyeballs.
Yes.
Stretch it back this way whenever you do it.
Yeah,
instead
you've
of
been
like
doing
this.
Some different.
Yeah, I've been stretching a lot
and stuff.
Trying to
get a little.
I get so
people
closed
ask
up
all the time.
About,
like, oh, how do your hands? It's like, oh, artists, you draw.
Yeah. But even still, I don't do it. It's probably a good idea to work your hands. You soak your hands and stuff like that.
A little bit, yeah. But I don't pop them. I've heard people all the time like trying to pop their knuckles and stuff. Yeah,
just out of habit.
Bad for the cartilage, man.
Right. I know. All right, glad we solved that problem. Right. Hey, thanks. Before we finish up, don't forget to go to our website, firesidetats.com, and fill out a little survey that'll help us answer your questions a little bit better. Also, while you're there, sign up for our mailing list, and you will get our free tips. It's actually a video. Short video that deals with or illustrates how to stretch and position folks for some of the trickier areas of the body to get line and color in. I think it'll help you.
Yeah.
It's free, and all you have to do is sign up for our mailing list.
It's like a click and a check.
It's like a click and just say, yes, sir, I'd like to see that. And we won't send anything crazy through your mailing list. Also, you can subscribe on iTunes. Make sure to rate us 5 stars while you're there. Like us on Facebook.
We appreciate it.
All that stuff.
And then, if you have any other questions, let us know.
YouTube, Fireside Tats, or YouTube has a Fireside Tats channel that you can see all of the videos as well.
And thanks again to Bob Westerholt
for our beers.
In St. Louis. Appreciate it.
And the Beard Balm guys. Thanks.
Bye. Good night.